Hello everybody and welcome to the studio. My name is Mel and I'm so excited that you're here to paint with me today. Let me introduce you to today's painting. We are going to be doing our vintage pumpkin, which is perfect for late fall. We're rolling into Thanksgiving, but we're not quite ready for those winter and Christmas scenes. We'll get there, I promise. I'll have some. But we're going to go through this painting one step at a time. So I'm going to point to the original painting and we're going to talk about what step it is that we're going to work on. Then I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'll tell you what brush to use, what color to use. If we have to make a color, I'll give you the recipe and show you how to mix it. And then I'm going to demonstrate everything in real time right here on my blank canvas. We'll zoom in, give you a nice tight shot so you can see everything. Remember, I'm painting with you by video and you're streaming me. So you can pause whenever you need to, so you can take a break, let something dry. You can rewind if you didn't hear what I said. And sometimes it's nice to just watch a step all the way through and rewind it before you actually tackle it yourself. So whether you've never painted before or you've done this a few times, I've got you. We're going to get our way through this. Let me show you what equipment we're using today. Okay, so let's talk about the equipment. I have a canvas panel here on a board. You can use canvas paper, you can use a stretched canvas, you can use a piece of wood, you can use a piece of paper, you can use a piece of cardboard, glass, whatever it is that you want to paint on, you can do it. So if you've ordered your kit from me, you've got a stretched canvas on a wooden frame, and you can just set that up on the easel that your box turns into. And we've got our palette paper. You can use an old paper plate as a palette if you got the kit. You've got one of these. But today I'm using some white, some black, a sage or an olive green, some dark blue or phthalo blue, and a little bit of deep yellow, just so that we can work with that green a little bit and manipulate it. I am using a 3/4 to 1 inch flat brush. And then I'm using a small, probably a size 4 if you're looking, filbert or round pointed brush. I've also got my old jar filled with tap water to rinse my brushes in and a paper towel to clean and dry them on. So get yourself all together and I'll be here ready. We'll get going. We are all set up. I've got a nice close-up here of the piece that we're using as our reference and the blank one that we'll be working on. And I want to just say real quick, I am trying out some new microphones. And I had it on my collar during the intro, but I feel like there might have been a lot of rustling there. We'll see when I edit it. But I'm moving the mic around in different spots. So right now I've got it under the painting, kind of clipped onto the easel. So just drop me a comment or send me a message and let me know what you think will work best or what gave you the best quality sound. We are going to begin by sketching out our pumpkin. And it may seem like an intimidating shape, but let me point a couple things out. First of all, these lines that define the segment of the pumpkins, those are parentheses. So if you can make a parenthesis, you can make a pumpkin, I guarantee you. I'm going to start off with my small brush, that one with the pointy filbert style tip. And I'm going to make just a tiny bit of gray. So we can just grab a little pea-sized amount of white and move it over. And then we're just going to take the tiniest speck of black. We can always make gray darker, but it's really hard to make it lighter. So we want one of the shades that's probably, I'd say around 15 if there are 50. On the lighter side of medium. And then I'm just going to take my brush, dip it in a little bit of water, and then work a little bit of that water into that gray paint. My goal here is to just thin it down almost like a watercolor so that I can use it to sketch out the shape of my pumpkin. We really won't see these lines when it's done, so I'm just adding little bits of water at a time. And now it's getting nice and inky and creamy. Now, you can put your pumpkin wherever you want it on the canvas. In the original, I've got it off to the right. And I'm going to stick with that on the one I'm working on today. I might shift it a little bit more towards center. But let's look at how big it is. If I stretch my hand out, it's about from pinky to thumb. But a better way to look at that is to just sort of cut whatever canvas you're using in half. And we can see that the top half of the pumpkin comes up about halfway through the top half of the canvas. So pick where you want your pumpkin to be. Wherever you want it to be. You're going to make just a little mark. You can just mark where the top center, or excuse me, where your pumpkin's going to go. Just pick a spot. So if I divide my canvas in half, I divided the top half again. And I know those lines are hard to see, but we don't want to make them too dark. And now we're going to begin creating the segments of our pumpkin. So to do that, I create a parenthesis that comes down to the left. And it doesn't need to be perfect. I bring it down almost all the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right. And again, you can decide how big you want it to be to fit into your space. But I like that center piece of the segment of the pumpkin to be the biggest. So in my case, it's about a closed hand's width, or about 3 inches. So now we've got our center segment of the pumpkin. We can close that off at the top. I don't worry too much about the bottom because we're going to cover that with some greenery. And now we're going to come out to the right and to the left. So grab a spot here at the top and create another parenthesis. And let it be a little bumpy. Doesn't need to come all the way as low as the first one. We can repeat that step over here on the left. Come out, bring that line down, and connect it. So we have 1, 2, 3 segments on our pumpkin now. And if you're moving a little slower than I am, just hit the pause button. I'm going to keep going. I'll be here when you get back. But I'm going to make one more on each side. And now I want to create just a little bit of a bump at the top. So I'm going to come in close here toward the center, bring up an angled line, and then create my parenthesis. And you can see I brought my pumpkin in a little bit from that right edge, and I'm okay with that. We'll do this again over here on the left. And now we've got the rough shape of our pumpkin, and we've got time that we can address later. Move things around, make it a little smoother, make it a little bumpier, whatever you like. But this is the basic composition of our pumpkin. So if you're not quite here yet, go ahead and give it a brief pause. And when you come back, I'm going to show you how we work on the stem and creating the ridge that will indicate the far side of that pumpkin. Okay. Now, we want to create the stem of our pumpkin, and to do that, I just start off again with a curved line, a parenthesis, that comes down into the center. Now, our pumpkin stem is going to have sort of this round edge on top where it was cut or snapped off of the vine. So I'm just going to put an oval there. And then from the left side, I'm just going to follow that curve and make it a little bit more narrow. You can really play with this shape, and we'll have plenty of time to fuss with it later. But for now, I just want that basic shape of the stem so that as I paint the background, I don't have to worry about that part. So we've got our stem and our pumpkin. And the last thing I'm going to do is just come along the back and create a curved line, a half circle on each side. And that's going to give us some dimension and indicate those segments in the back that we're just seeing from the angle that we're at. So parentheses to create the shape of the pumpkin. Get your stem in there and don't worry about anything else. When you're ready, come back and we'll work on that background. We are back and we're going to start on our background. And before you start nitpicking your pumpkin, let me remind you, we're going to be able to play with it and change it. And right now, it's the only thing on your canvas. So it's sort of like when you watch those girls on Instagram or TikTok do their contouring. When they first put those lines on, you have very little faith. You're like, how is that going to turn into beautiful shading on your makeup? But somehow it always does. And we're going to do the same thing here. So let's get our big brush. I'm going to use it. This one's about a 3/4 inch. If you've got a 1/2 inch, a 1 inch, that'll work as well. You want a flat top. And we are going to mix a turquoise for our background. So to do that, I like to pick up a scoop of white. And that's about the size of an olive, like the one you put on your finger at Thanksgiving. And then I'm going to come over to the green and get about an equal amount of that. And just move it right over. See how I roll my brush? And that just sort of helps me drop off that paint. You'll get better at it as we paint more, I promise. And then I'm going to pick up about half as much blue. So 1 part yellow, 1 part white, 1 part green, half a part blue. And I'm going to swirl these together. Now, as I'm mixing, you can see it's sort of like when you fold a mousse. You want to go from the outside in, because if we just swirl in circles, we're going to end up painting our palette paper and run out of paint for our canvas. But I also like to leave a little bit of that marbling in there, because that will give me different colors and shades as I paint my background. So let's get this going. My brush has all sorts of swirly colors on there, and I'm just going to start sweeping, following the shape of my pumpkin. You can get really close and press that brush flat, drag it across that line. It'll give you a nice clean edge. I'm not going to go under the pumpkin. I'm going to let that greenery come off the bottom of the page up into my shape. And I'm just going to swirl. Follow this sweeping circular pattern here, going from the top and down and out. Now, if I had any blue or white swirls in my paint, they're going to give me some streaks here, and that'll be fun. And I'm going to take this all the way out to the top corner and the bottom corner. Just a quick, easy coat. We're going to come back and play with it in just a moment. But what we want to do is get this first layer down. And you can take your time. Just remember, you want to move faster than your paint dries for this step. So I'm going to get this front half here, just moving my brush around in this little section and putting my brush down in that center and coming up and out. Now, if you want, you could do a crisscross stroke to get a texture in your background, and that'll give you movement as well. But I like this sort of swirl that comes out, like it radiates. So I'm only going to do this half so that I can work faster than it dries. And at this point, I'm going to give my brush a quick rinse. So take your brush, sweep across the bottom of your cup, give it a little gentle bounce and wiggle. And then you can just drag your brush across the edge of your water glass or jar. And if it's still dirty, drop it back in and do it again. Drag those bristles, scrape out that excess water, and I'm just going to sweep it off on my paper towel to get any excess out. Now that I have my base color here, what I want to do is think about, is it too flat? And I think that mine is a little bit flat. So what I want to do is just grab a tiny bit of blue, just the tiniest bit there, and I'm going to come along this section where the stem is. Now you can do this up in the corner, you can do it coming from down below, or all three. Let's see what that looks like. My goal here is to just add a little bit of depth. Just make the color a little bit darker. Give it a little bit of, dimension. Now I've got a little oogie from my paintbrush in there. Clean that off. Give that a little sweep. I can even add a little blue up here to the top left corner. Again, I'm using that circular sweeping motion following the shape of my pumpkin. And when you're ready or you want to, you can even just go to the edge of your white, grab a little bit of white, and streak that in. The whole idea is just create a little bit of variety in our background so that it's not completely flat. And you can play with it, let it dry. If you're not sure about it, you can always put another coat over it. That's the beauty about painting at home. We can take our time and make different decisions. So I'm done with this side. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. I'm going to come around and start on the right side. When you're ready, meet me back here and follow along. Okay, so to do the right side, I'm going to do it the same as the left. Grab that mix of that background color, that sort of turquoisey shade. And I'm just coming around the edge of my pumpkin to create a clean line there, sort of a bumper. Down around that bottom edge and follow that sweeping application stroke, following the shape of that pumpkin. All the way to the bottom corner and then all the way up to the top right. You may lose some of your shading and swirls as you apply this base coat, but remember, we're going to do just what we did over here on the left. Once you've got this whole layer in, when you're ready, clean off your brush, give it a good swish and rinse, scrape off that excess water by dragging the bristles across the edge. Sweep it or press it into your paper towel and pick up a little bit of blue. Bring that around that bottom right corner and it'll blend. You see how it just mixes and blends? It'll lighten up as we come in toward our main character here, the pumpkin. Same thing on the upper right. Working my way in so that it blends and lightens as I get toward my pumpkin. Just little bits, not going to do a whole lot. And now I'm just streaking in a little white and blending it out until I'm happy with it. And with that, our background is done. So this is a good time for you to take a break if you need one. I have my heat gun, or if you have a blow dryer, that works as well. I'm going to hit it because I want it to be completely dry before I come in and start working on the pumpkin, or any of this background color will end up blending in and streaking in with my pumpkin, and then I've got trouble I don't need. So let's hit it with the blow dryer and I'll see you back here soon. Okay, so now we're ready to start working on our pumpkin. And I want to talk to you for a minute about your paint water. You can see mine is almost the same color as our background. But my brush is pretty clean. And even though some of the water is in the brush bristles, as long as I sweep it out, I'm going to be quite successful painting with my white. Now, if you're nervous about that, take a minute and go change out your paint water. Because the more comfortable you are and the more care that you take to not cause yourself extra problems, the more successful you're going to be. You'll feel more comfortable. You won't have to be fighting this little bit of turquoise that you think got in your paint. And it's frustrating. So this is self-care time. We're supposed to be relaxing. Change out your paint water if it's oogy and it bothers you. Okay, so I'm continuing with my big brush with that 1/2 inch or 1 inch tip. And I want to make some more gray because we're going to use that as the shadow for our pumpkin. So first I'm going to scoot over and take about a lima bean amount of white. And see that trick? Just roll your brush, drop it off. And then I'm going to grab a tiny bit, just a speck there. You can see just a tiny speck of black and add that. I want my gray to be not quite a medium tone, on the lighter side. We can come back and make it darker. We can't make it lighter. So a little bit of gray. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put in these back sections here. Just come up and over. Put those back in. I lost them a little bit doing my background. And it's a little light, I can see. So, like I said, we can add black. Darken up a little bit of that for me. There we go. And just come right up over that edge. And then I'm going to follow my pumpkin segment line. Just right down to the bottom. but I'm only going to do one. I'm going to do one at a time. So I'm coming down along that edge. I'm going to rinse off my brush real quick. Give it a quick rinse and dry. And I'm going to grab some white. And starting at the next line, I'm going to sweep down and up toward my gray. And when I hit that gray section, I just get a little bit vigorous with my sweeping motion over it. And that's what's going to create the shadow in our pumpkin segments. We're going to do these one at a time. So now I can come back. I want to make this gray just a touch darker. Tiny bits. Try to only do a little damage at once so you don't have too much to undo. Grab your line and pull down. It doesn't need to be perfect. Pumpkins are not perfect. And at this point, do not be tempted to continue to sweep and drop off that remaining paint in your brush. Rinse it out. Whoops, without spilling your water everywhere like I just did. Grab some more white. Start the furthest point away from what you just did. Sweeping, following that shape. Get right up to it. And then keeping it in its place if you can. Give it a little push. Now, you may end up with some gray blending. And if that starts to happen, just stop, wipe off your brush, and leave it be. Once it dries a little bit, we can come back and add some more. But we're just going to keep rinsing and repeating. So I'm taking my gray. I'm finally pretty happy with the shade. Trying to clean that edge up there just a scotch. Come along that left edge. Create that shadow of the segment. Clean off my brush. Grab some white. Now this time we have that whole segment, so I'm going to start in the middle and work my way to the left. And once I get there, I'm just going to sweep in that spot and let it blend. Like I said, if it starts to get away from you or you feel like you have too much gray, clean off your brush. You could even take a piece of paper towel if you needed to and wipe some of it off. But you don't want to fuss with it. We'll consider this our first coat because we can always come back and add some more if we want to. So work on this left half of your pumpkin. And once you get there, come back and see me. And I'll show you how we're going to do the right side. We're going to start on the right side of the pumpkin now. Remember what I said earlier, if this is bothering you, let it dry and we can put another coat on it. The more we mess with it, the more everything becomes one shade of gray and we lose any definition we had. So going back to my gray, this time I'm coming all the way to the right, working my way in again, just like we did before. Got to make a little more gray. I was running out. Okay, so come down along that edge, all the way down. Bottom doesn't need to be perfect. Rinse out your brush. Grab your white. Starting on the left side this time. Get that curve in, work your way toward it, and sweep. And as you sweep, you'll see it start to blend. That's what we want. Wipe off my brush, grab some more gray. We're almost there. Get down that line. Pumpkins aren't perfect. They've got bumps and lumps, so don't worry if your lines are not perfect. Bring in your white. Then we got one more here, uno más. Some gray down along that right edge. Rinse off my brush. One more blob of white from the middle, work my way out to where the gray is and hit that. And at this point, I'm going to let this dry. And once it dries, we'll come back in and take another pass at it. Got my first layer here dried, and I'm going to come in and do a second layer on it just to build up some depth and dimension, and because that's how we sort of make pieces look more interesting as we add layers to it, and it gives it texture and light and things that you didn't know you could do. We just do it one simple step at a time. So clean big brush, make sure that you've got a little bit of gray here. We're not going to need as much paint on the second layer. The naked canvas has already soaked it up, and so we can come through and you'll see you get just much better application. So I'm going to go ahead and use less of that gray. And I'm going to do this whole left side in one swoop, because I can move a little faster. If you're not comfortable with that yet and you're like, whoa, Mel, slow down, you can continue going one segment at a time. But now I'm picking up that white and I'm just sweeping it on, maybe blending a little bit with that gray. Depends on what you like. I also come in one more time after it's all done and add little bits of bright white. But remember, you got to move faster than your paint dries. And I'm sitting around talking, so maybe one section at a time would have been the better move here. And I'm just going to play with this a little bit until I feel like I'm getting things looking the way I want them to. But I also don't want to mess with it too much, because then you just end up with everything with one shade of gray, and we want all 50 shades of gray in our pumpkin here. Okay, scoot that around. Maybe deepen this up a little by adding just a little bit more gray. Making that bottom just a little bit darker. But just little bits at a time. Consider this to be like the highlighter. So a little bit of gray. I'm going to try one segment at a time this time. There we go. That goes a little easier. Smooth that in. A little more gray. Add a little more. And just come along this front one. I'm not going to mess with it too much more. What I want to do is let it dry. Once I have the greenery on it, I'll know where I need to add a little bright pops of white, like where the curves are. But we're going to let this rest and dry. So finish up, get yourself there. If it all starts to turn into one shade, stop, let it dry. Come back and take another whack at it. And I'll see you in a few minutes. We'll start working on all the greenery, like the stem and our leaves, things like that. Okay, we are back. Now, like I said before, at this point, we're still looking at our pumpkin and we're just not convinced of it. But once we start adding the accessories like our greenery, our stem, and our leaves, everything really comes to life a little bit more. So I want to start with sort of this random greenery that we have going on here at the bottom. And for that, I want my small pointy filbert brush. And I'm going to mix up some green. So I've got my olive green here. Take a little bit of that, move it over, And then I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. So it's about 3 parts green to 1 part yellow and 1 part white. And we'll stir that together. And you see it just sort of brightens up that green a little bit. We're going to use this as our base color. So it was, just so you remember, 3 parts of green, 1 part yellow, and 1 part white. 3-1-1. And I'm going to use this as my base color. So I also need a shade of this that's a little bit darker and a shade that's a little bit lighter. So let's try to move this into a pile there in the middle. Good. Now I'm going to grab a tiny little speck of black and work it in over here on one side. I don't need a lot of it, so I can bring a little bit of the green over and add just a tiny little bit of black. I want it to be a little bit darker. I'm going to leave this here so that you can see the difference. There's our darker. Now let me clean my brush real quick. I'm going to do the same thing, but on the opposite side with a little bit of white. Grab a little bit of white, work it into the edge. So you can see I've got a dark, a medium, and a light. Let's start with the dark. You can even use a little water to thin this down so that you can get a nice ribbony stroke on your grasses. So work a little water in there. And come up to the bottom of your pumpkin and just start at the bottom and start pulling some squiggly lines like grasses up. That's all you got to do. Have some faith. If you're a little nervous, take a sip of your drink. Take a deep breath, say a prayer, whatever it is you need to do. And I'm just using the tip of the brush and wiggling, letting these lines come out all over, out to the left, out to the right. I feel like that's not quite dark enough, so I'm adding just a touch more black. There we go. Having those 3 tones, the light, medium, and dark, are what's going to give these grasses some depth and dimension without us having to work really hard at it. So instead of playing with light and shadow like real serious artists, we're using the shades of our paint to do that work for us. Just centering, using that as a center. Almost like my pumpkin is sitting in a little bit of a nest, right? Kind of looks like it's in a nest. And I added some more black even. I'm going to bring this closer. Can you see the difference in those colors? So I may end up with more than 3 shades in my grass, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But I don't want to fill this all in because I'm going to use our medium and our light tone to help balance that out. So I'm going to give my brush a rinse, and when you're ready, come to your medium tone. Again, a little bit of water is your friend, thinning down that paint so that it gets a little creamy and you can just pull those nice lines. You don't want it drippy, you just want it to be a little bit creamier. So with this medium tone, I'm coming right in and over, adding another layer, some more dimension, bringing that green right on through. Nice and easy. You guys doing okay? Do you need to turn on some music? You relaxing? Good. That's what we're supposed to do. All right. And now I'm pretty happy with that. We can see the difference. We've got dark, we've got a lighter tone. Now I'm going to rinse off my brush and start adding the lightest shade. Now, if you want, you can stop and dry this in between. You can take your time. If you're running out of time, put it on pause, come back tomorrow. You don't want to have to rush through this. Whole point is to just have some fun and relax. Don't want to make it hard. Okay, now I've got my light shade. Oop, I think I need to make it even lighter. Add a bit more white to it. And just try to bring that over and against some of the darker pieces. Just so that we get that contrast. And that's it. All right, work on your grasses, that little nest basket. And when you come back, we'll start working on our stem and then we'll add our leaves. We are making some progress here. I like my pumpkin a whole lot more since I put the grass at the bottom. I'm not looking at every little single stroke because now I've got something that gives it a little bit more balance. And that will continue to improve as we add some more greenery to this piece. So let's keep going. I've got my small brush again, and I want to go with my dark green mix. I'm going to make a little bit more. I want all three colors again, so I'm just going to add a little bit of green to each pile. And then I'm going to add a little black over here to keep that dark tone. We want these for our stems and our leaves as well. That dark tone, a little bit of white for the light side. Okay, and here we go. I'm going to start off with my darkest stuff, and that's going to be over here, as you can see on the right side. So I'm going to come around that right edge of the cap down, even a little bit on here, but we'll lighten that up. And I'm going to keep most of this dark color on the right, working my way toward the center. Now, when I hit the center, I'm going to pick up a little bit of green. We can add some yellow to it if you want to brighten it up. And bring that from the center out over. So we've got the shadow, a little bit of shadow underneath. Use the tip of that brush to bring the stem of your pumpkin down. And that is our basic shading. We can use the lighter green, our lightest, the one we add white to just come around on the left side and bring down a few little wiggly strokes. Remember, the texture of a pumpkin stem is kind of rough and ropey. So I just use irregular lines. I'm not doing photorealism here, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is what we call expressionism, where, you know what it is by looking at it, but it's not a photorealistic representation. That's why it's called art, because we're mixing it up a little and adding our own vision to it. So you can play with this as much or as little as you like. Even take little bits of yellow and add some brightness there. Let me pull this forward so you can see. See how I just hit that with little bits of yellow? So when you get up close, it's kind of freaky deaky. But when you pull it back, it looks like a pumpkin stem. So if you're experiencing that with your painting, you're probably painting about 2 feet at the most away from your piece, more like 18 inches. You got to stand up and walk across the room and put some distance between yourself and that piece. It makes a huge difference in how you see it. You know, you're like your kids a little bit better when they came home from grandma's after the weekend, right? It's because you got a break from them. You got to do the same thing with your painting. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone. I'll come back to it. What I want to do now is add my little viney swirls. So, just like with everything else with our greenery, go back to that base color with the dark green. And for this, again, add a little bit of water to it. Thin it down just a little bit, that paint, so that you get some flow off that brush. And I like to hold my brush a little further back for this. When I'm doing fine work, you see me hold my brush right up here at the ferrule, where the metal meets the wood or the plastic, and that gives me fine, tight control. But if I move my brush further back, and I put some movement on it, there's more range of motion, and the brush can just move a little bit looser. So start at the base and drag your brush along, creating your little swirls. You can put in 2 or 3. I messed that one up, not going to worry about it. Come on over to the other side and do it again. And just drag those out. We've got 2 of them there, one on the left and one on the right. And we're going to let those dry before we come back and do anything else to them. We'll add some highlight, but for now, we're going to let them dry. We can come in, I'm just playing with my stem a little bit, and add just a little bit of shadow down here where it's in at the deepest. Make that darkest part down where it hits in that dip and pull up. That'll help with that shadowing or shading. But that's all we're going to do with our stem for now. So give yourself some time and some grace. And when you're ready, come back and see me. And we'll add a little bit more white to our pumpkin and finish up with our leaves. Okay, I want to add some more white to my pumpkin. So I'm getting my big brush back out. Getting it nice and clean. And all I'm going to do is pick up, find some clean white here. Just get a little bit on the end. I'm going to line that brush up and do just a couple of quick hits of white. I call this hit it and quit it painting. A quick streak and move along. Don't try to blend it in. Just let that light do its job and be a highlight. Just a few quick hits, and you see that sort of softened and brightened it up a little bit. So I move that around. We've got some nice dimension there, and I'm pretty happy with it. So we're just going to let it be. All right, so now that we've brightened up our pumpkin, oops, I want one more little, there we go. Maybe it needs a bit more. See, this is what happens if you don't stop when you say you're going to stop. It's like popcorn. You just keep going. Until you're wrecked. So let's not wreck this. Okay, I'm done. Brush down. Let's come in and put in some leaves. Remember, we need a dark, medium, and light tone for our green. And I'm going to start off with my smaller brush. I'm going to take a little bit of my dark mixture and I'm just going to bring out a line that's going to, like a curved line here. Comes curving from about 1/3 of the way down the canvas down. And then I'm going to bring one more out to the left. This is where I'm going to put my leaves. Now to do my leaves, I want to start with my darker color and just 1 parenthesis, 2 parenthesis, fill it in. Come over to the next side, 1 parenthesis, 2 parenthesis, fill it in. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It's leaves, they're organic. Don't sweat the small stuff. You can make them get a little bit bigger as you go down the line. You can leave some of the stems showing. You can crowd them. The choices are all yours, people. Keep bringing those down. As far as you want. I think I'm going to stop mine right about here. And then I'm going to come over to the other stem and do the same thing. And some of them may overlap or touch with the one we just did. It's all right. That's how it happens. Just a few in there. Now I can add one on the other side as well. Now I know I paint faster than you, so feel free to hit the pause button. Go ahead and get your base layer done of however many pieces of greenery you want to put in. I'm going to do 3, 2 on the left, 1 on the right. Doing our base color here first. And once you're there, come back and see me and we'll start adding some highlight and dimension to these leaves. All right, look at how much progress we've made. We are almost done with our fall pumpkin here. Now I'm going to clean off my small brush and grab a little bit of my medium tone green. And remember that medium tone, I like to add just a tiny touch of that yellow to brighten it up just a bit. And you can pick a side where you want to have the bright spots on your leaves. I'm going to do the left and the top, because that's, to me, where the light would be hitting. So I'm just coming down, doing a quick little swoop on that top section there. Maybe on the right. There we go. See how it gives those leaves just a little bit more shape, a little more character. Same thing over here. And it doesn't have to blend perfectly. It can be an intentional stroke. Let me pull that close. You can see they don't blend. Those strokes are there as highlights. They're meant to be there. Get those little hits in. Wipe off your brush. Grab a little bit of your lightest shade that you're going to use. Just trying to get mine a little bit of white in it. And then I'm going to go over that same part with just one smaller, quick little hit. Hit it and quit it one time on each leaf. Do not go back. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Hit it and quit it. Boom. Let's go over to the other side. Now, if you want to blend these and make it a little bit more, variegated, by all means, do you, boo. I just like to try to keep things as simple as possible because we can always zhuzh them up, but it's really hard to create paintings that every skill level can do. So I try to keep these as simple as possible. Now here, I felt like I needed a little bit more darkness right there. So I added a little more greenery. But I just have one final step. So while I'm waiting for you guys to catch up, let me tell you a little bit. If you haven't joined Paint with Mel and Friends over on Facebook, please go and do that now. I'm going to put it right up here on the screen for you. And that's where we hang out and share pictures of our work. If you've got questions or suggestions for me, always drop them there. It's a quick, easy way to reach out with other Paint with Mel members. And I do want to say a special thank you and a debt of gratitude to my Paint with Mel members. I am having so much fun painting with you every month. And I can't believe that somehow this is my life and I get to do this with you. So without you, that wouldn't be possible. So thank you. Thank you so much. And, tag me on social media. You can always use #PaintWithMel and I'll find you so we can see what you've got going on. All right, I'm going to move this a little closer to do our final step so that you get a nice close view because I can't zoom anymore. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of my lighter green on my small brush, and where there are curves, I'm just going to hit a little bit of those curves on my vines. Just a little bit to make it look like there's a little bit of shape there, a little more dimension. And that is all it takes. So there you go, our rustic festive fall pumpkin. I still need to name this painting before it goes up today. So yeah, what do you think? Do you like it? I can't wait to see how all of yours turn out. Well, all right, you guys, there we go. Our rustic vintage pumpkin. I love it, and I can't wait to put it up on the wall. That's one of my favorite ways to decorate for the holidays now, especially because all my kids are grown up and gone, is to just use art. So I have paintings that I use over and over again, and of course I like to add to them and mix it up. There we go, without that glare on it. Look at her. Look at that big old pumpkin. I love it. All right, you guys, happy fall, and I will see you next time. Take care.